Welcome, everyone. My name is Debbie Edwards, and I am the school board president. Our agenda for this meeting is available on the Young Community Schools website. So, superintendent.
Did it say Denise on there?
It said Denise,
Yes.
and I'm the vice president.
From last one?
Yeah, but guess what?
I love it.
You got it. I got it right.
We
So
tried.
they're always trying to keep us on our toes.
We do not have anybody signed up for community comment this evening.
Okay, thank you. Moving right along. We have study session 2024-25 budget.
So the purpose of our meeting this evening is to talk about budget. And there's a lot to talk about. We're gonna have some conversation. Jennifer has a presentation, but I know Jennifer and I both have an interest in having conversation. So as we go through the slides, we do want to make it conversational. This is kind of the introduction to the budget that you will receive. We may even get it to them tomorrow or Monday for the board meeting next Thursday, where we're gonna be asking you to adopt a budget. We've kept you in the loop along the way with the many challenges that we are facing due to a number of things that Jennifer will talk about, but why don't we start with letting Jennifer get into the presentation, and then as we go through it, again, let's make sure that we have conversation as we go. It's not one of those where just talking at you.
And this is all for information. We're not
Correct.
voting on anything or.
We're not asking you to take any action tonight. Tonight is more about providing information and having conversation.
Great.
Right, yeah, in past years, the normal process would be that I would just present you a presentation on the night of the budget adoption. But with the situation that we're in, I thought it was important to have a budget study session. So that I could go over, kind of break down the budget and some of the ins and outs of it. I have the actual 127 page budget right here, but I didn't think you would want that. So
Thanks.
I will go through a PowerPoint and break down as much as I can, but I also have a handout. So this is, I'll go over this in a little bit. Right?
You want all 127 pages?
Me too.
Yeah, and I'll talk about this later, but this is the
This is
four-year
just the backup.
forecast that I
Okay.
typically go over on the night of the budget
Yes.
presentation. But I wanted to give you a sneak preview because it's very exciting. So, okay. All right, so wanted to talk about
Point this way.
really, Terry.
And just test them.
You set me up. I know it. Oh, good. I was hoping it wouldn't work, so you have to do it for me. Okay, so I just wanted to go over some of the goals for today. So understanding why we're here, how we got to where we're at, in the position we're in right now. I'm gonna do some explaining of staffing funding versus our actual costs. So what the state funds us for. I'm gonna be sharing a breakdown of revenue and expenditure projections for the 24-25 budget compared to the current projections. I'm gonna be sharing, I handed out the four-year forecast. Don't look at it yet, Bill. All of you. No, I'm kidding. You can look at it. And then I'll be sharing some cost saving measures to date, and then additional work that we're doing to address additional cuts. And then obviously answer any questions that you have, because if there are unanswered questions that you still want information for, I want to make sure I get that to you before the adoption next Thursday. And if there's a lot of information, we may even get to have another budget session. So contributing factors, I think the most obvious one is our double levy failure. We have our ESSER cliff, and these are things I've talked about many times, our reduced enrollment in previous years. So since at the beginning of COVID, we had reduced enrollment, which ate away at our fund balance every year. There was only 1 year, the ESSER funding that we received, that they allowed us to offset revenues from lost enrollment, lost revenues. And then we've had a reduction of our local equalization funding, quite significant. I was gonna look up the dollar amounts, but I didn't have time before the meeting, but I can get those for you. And then we have, I don't think you've ever heard this, that the state's not funding basic ed. And then we have 2 open bargaining groups right now. I know you're very well aware of that. And then continued cost increases. We just got our insurance bill for next year, and it increased by almost $200,000. Just our premiums for 1 year. But we keep seeing increased cost of food and utilities and insurance and all goods and services. So I want to talk about, you've seen this slide before. There's some percentages added though. This is just to show our fund balance depletion over the last several years. The percentages there are the current year, and really the purpose is to show that we're not meeting our 5% minimum fund balance. So this is monthly fund balance as a percentage of the expenditures. We have it set aside in our fund balance as the to budgeted expenditures, but then every month we calculate it as our actuals come in. So we talked about not meeting our minimum fund balance. Okay, so I wanted to talk about some budget assumptions and unknowns. So as I'm building the budget, we're having a lot of conversations about different things, and there's some things that are easy to project and some things that aren't. And since COVID, it's even made it a little bit harder to do projections because things just aren't like you would think they would be. So enrollment fluctuations. The last couple of years, we've just used a conservative roll-up approach. So we're not really increasing enrollment unless those roll-ups increased the numbers at certain grades. Then we have, I already mentioned, we have current negotiations, so we don't know what the outcome will be. We have staffing levels and programs, so we have made some cuts, and those are the staffing levels that are in the budget right now, after the cuts were made, and programs, and so we'll continue monitoring those. New revenue streams, or I guess I should say no new revenue streams. That's the assumption I make, but there could possibly be. We don't know what the legislative session is going to do this year. They're always full of surprises. So food service participation and transportation ridership, that's one of the things that's been really hard to project since COVID. So I'm pretty conservative. Our ridership numbers have been down, so I did not budget as much as we received this year. And then our food service participation, when we're going to CEP, we're not sure what that'll look like as far as the revenues, because we do need to get families to submit family income surveys, and that impacts our other funding sources. And then inflation I've already talked about. Special Ed Safety Net Award. This one's really hard to project because this year I projected 500,000 and we're receiving 992 because, as you know, we have kids that are placed out of state and they're very expensive every month. So we get reimbursed for those high cost kids. But we could have a kid come back from out of state. We could have kids come on that need a one-on-one that didn't need them before. So that's really hard to project. So Shannon and I have met and talked about that one. So he kind of helps with that. Fundraisers, as you know, there's a lot of interest in fundraisers right now. I have not included any new revenues in the budget because we don't know what those are. And so just to be conservative, until we receive them, we don't know. And then when we do receive them, there's likely going to be expenditures associated with those revenues because we'll be adding things back, likely. And then levy passage, that's an unknown. So, state apportionment funding. I'm just going to talk about the high level, and you've probably seen this before and heard about it, but we could spend a whole day talking about the state apportionment funding formula. So I just wanted to talk about the prototypical funding model, how we're funded by our staff, and then how we're allocated the funding and how that relates to what we spend on staffing, since that is most of our budget. So enrollment is what drives all of our state apportionment funding, our basic ed state apportionment funding. We have other categorical programs that we're funded that are based on enrollment and poverty levels and some other things, but the majority of our funding is our basic ed funding. So it's based on our enrollment. Our enrollment produces staffing units. So there are certain factors in the prototypical funding model that based on your enrollment, that's the number of staffing you get allocated funding for. And then we have our MSOCs. So regionalization, the next slide, regionalization and experience factors. So these are some things that some districts receive and some don't in their funding formulas as part of the funding model. We have not for many years received either one of those. As you know, this is the first year we received regionalization factor. And we received 6% this year, and that equated to $2.6 million across all of our staff, certificated, classified, and admin. And we do not receive experience factor.
What is that 6% of? We receive 6% of what?
We receive an increase in the statewide average salary of 6%. So for each staff that's allocated, we're allocated a teacher, and the statewide average that we're funded for is 80,000. They add 6% to that. And then they also add 6% to the benefits associated with that position. Okay. So again, let's focus on salaries and benefits. Salaries in the funding model are calculated based on a statewide average amount, which I just mentioned, for certificated staff, certificated admin, and classified. So there are separate calculations that the formula goes through. And then benefits are allocated as an amount per FTE. So it's just a certain percentage per the FTE. And then other benefits are allocated on a percentage of total salary. The amount allocated as an amount per FTE is your health benefits, is your SEP benefits. And it's this year it's 13,200. Next year it's 14,136 or something. It goes up a little bit. So the prototypical staffing model, I thought it would be good to see this slide. It's very telling when you look at these numbers. So what this is showing you is there are three grade spans that that the prototypical model has factors in to allocate staffing. So for example, the very first line you see principals, that's how many students it takes to generate one principal at each of those levels. For elementary, 319 generates one. That includes assistant principals too. And so it goes on down, librarians, counselors, all the staffing that are included in the prototypical model. So if you look down at teaching assistants, that's our paras. And so at elementary that has 427 students, which we have a couple less than that, that they would only generate one para. So, and we know that we hire quite a few more than that. And then we have office support, non-instructional aides, and then down, student and staff safety is another one. Look at those big numbers. It takes 5,063 students in one elementary school to generate one student or staff safety position. And a lot of that is our paras doing supervision for bus duty and for lunch duty, and crossing guard. So that's a very small amount. We have to fund much or hire much more than that. So any questions about that? Okay. So state funding versus actual cost. So I talked about how we're funded. We're funded on a statewide average. Well, that statewide average is in all cases less than what we actually pay our staff. So I just gave some examples here. Jennifer Pretty from the ESD back in March or April did a data analysis for us for all of our positions, what we're funded for from the state and what we have and the cost versus what we're funded. So I just am giving a few examples. So teachers, it shows that we're allocated 278 teachers in the formula. But if you look at our district FTE, it's less than that by about 15. So we hire less teachers than we're allocated. But what people don't remember is that we're paying more for those staff. So we're paying over $3 million for 15 less staff than we're allocated, than we're generated in the model. Principals, we are allocated 17, we have 16. It costs us $328,000 more. So again, we hire a little bit less, but we have to pay more. And then paraeducators, as you saw in the numbers in the previous slide, it takes a lot of students to generate paras. So we're allocated 14, And we have 29.6. Oh, I wanted to point out, this is just basic education. So this doesn't include all of our grant and category, like our special ed paras. This is just our basic ed funded staff. So para educators, 29.6. We pay 1.1 million more than we're funded for from the state. And then again with custodians, same thing, we're paying 740,000 more. When we look at all of our positions, I only listed a few examples here. If we look at all of our positions, we're paying $5.7 million more than the state is providing us for basic education staff.
And I'll just add to that, so that 5.7 would typically come out of your levy dollars, it could come out of your ending fund balance, your general fund, you know, but your levy is that's where that comes into play. And so as we were talking, looking ahead, that's why that number is so important, because we don't have that levy starting in January.
Are our numbers pretty typical statewide for other districts?
Of like size.
I would guess that every district is paying a significant amount more for salaries ever since McCleary, when there was an influx of one-time funding for districts, and negotiations have just kept going up and up and up and up.
Well, and we've got districts right now that are having financial challenges and they've passed their levy. So like Jennifer's saying, so they're even beyond the capacity of their levy collection to make up that difference. And that's gonna keep going, because what happens is there's no lid there. And so when you're negotiating, you're being compared to your neighbors and you're being compared to like-sized districts. So you're always competing. And so it just continues to rise, and our funding has not. And so then you gotta ask yourself, at some point, something's gonna have to give, because districts will not be able to continue at this pace.
You have a question?
Go first.
So on the teachers, on the unfunded at 3 million. So the district cost and the allocated funding, does that take in, or is that the majority of the difference is because of new teacher versus someone that's on the end of retiring?
Yeah, that's part of it, yeah.
I mean-
It's just that the state funds
Only
funds the same amount for every teacher,
Teacher,
and
no
an
matter-
average amount, right?
But the longer they're here and towards the end, the more it costs us,
Right,
right?
exactly,
So
exactly.
the first year, second year, third year teacher is different with, you know. Do you have any idea, just off the top, you don't need to get me, I know. Yeah, and I'm sure that, you know, you're, that, like, do we have, I don't even know how many staff we have, but do we have 5 that are up over, you know, 85,000?
That'd be a great question for Dee Dee Buckingham, our HR director. Would you like to join me?
You're just asking how many are in the top part of our salary
Yeah.
schedule?
The top part of
I
our
think it's
salary.
65-ish.
Yeah, I'm gonna say, yeah, it's above 60 that are in the MA 90 at the top 2.
Yeah, the top 2.
Yeah, we have,
Okay.
yeah.
So that, I mean,
I know,
that's
I-
expensive, but also that's a good thing when you think about a district. That means people are staying.
Oh, yes, I
If you
see
are
it
a
both
district-
ways.
Yeah, if you're a
That is
district
correct.
that mostly has young teachers, then it might mean that you're not retaining staff, whereas Yelm has always done a very good job of retaining staff. And so it's a really good thing, but it's
But
also expensive.
Expensive.
And there are a lot of districts that have more staff than us at the top, and they get what I referred to earlier as that experience factor. If we have people high on the schedule, a certain number of percentage, you get an experience factor.
But we don't have that, even with the
We don't
number,
qualify yet.
we don't qualify.
Well, what do you have to do to qualify?
Yeah,
You have to
good
meet a certain,
experience.
yeah, you have to meet a certain percentage of staff that are above average.
Remember, you don't get paid.
I know.
We don't
the
get it, so I don't
three
pay
of us
attention to
on
the
5,
formula.
we have so much experience amongst us that we should
Yeah.
bump it up over.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
should,
of course.
yeah, we should put the board on the S275.
Sorry.
Casey, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm curious. can get into a little bit on why we've got 30 paras FTE versus 14.
That we have 30, that,
Yeah, we're over double what's allocated. Can you just get into a little bit of why?
Over the years.
because the state, if we funded based on what we're allocating the prototypical funding model, I don't imagine our schools will be very safe at all. I don't imagine that, that our behavior would get any better, probably be much worse. We have to have a certain number of staff to do the supervision. That's, and the paras assisting in the classrooms, so that's what,
Is our 30 more closely aligned with neighboring districts?
I,
We're probably lower than many, we were higher, but we have made some reductions there. And I will say, paras are vital to the education system, and without them, teachers can't do what they do. And I mean, when you talk about recess, you talk about lunchroom, you talk about at the bus before and after school, you talk about small group instruction. We're actually, I think, pretty light compared to some.
Yeah, I'm not asking questions, not constitute me advocating.
No, it's-
I'm just trying
it's
to
ridiculous
understand
how
that
little-
difference.
It's ridiculous how little we get for paraeducators because they are really the glue that holds together our schools.
I know, I was surprised when it was up there, the funding mechanism for them, and I'm like, they're vital in so many areas, and yet the legislators, when they come up with this model, would act like they're not. It's like they should go sit in school sometime.
I'm sure they've never been told that. Yeah,
I think we need to do.
I
some
completely agree.
talking. We've never been on the playground.
Okay, I wanted to talk a little bit about enrichment versus basic ed, because we've been talking about all these additional costs we pay that we don't get funded for. And where is that money gonna come from? It's gonna come out of our levy. So enrichment, I just wanted to talk about enrichment a little bit, enhancing basic education by filling funding gaps. So if we are only funded for a specific number of staff, then if we have more than that, then that's enriching our students' education by having those additional staff. So I listed some examples because a lot of people think that it's just for athletics and extracurricular activities. When they think of levy, they think of clubs and activities and sports. And they don't think about all of the other things that we enrich our students' education with. So I just listed some, there's a lot more. But paying staff more than the state provides for staffing costs, that's what we just talked about. That's enrichment. Enrichment is having more staff to decrease class sizes. That's enrichment. So people say that teachers are not enrichment, but in reality they are. Adding counselors, social workers, nurses, I listed a whole bunch here. There's a lot of for social and emotional support. That's enrichment, even though there's a huge need for that. We need those staff, but that's considered enrichment and we're not funded for it. Provide additional paraeducators for supervision and classroom support, what we were just talking about. And then providing enhanced programs, CTE, college and high school, AVID, arts, library, and the list goes on and on. So I just wanted to, I've heard people talk about saying that, you know, the cuts we're making are not enrichment, but they really are. We do have to also use our local levy dollars for some things that may not appear to be enrichment, such as the unfunding of special education. We use our levy dollars to subsidize that program. We shouldn't have to do that. So that's why the legislative platforms have been so heavy on special education the last several years.
You know how much we subsidize our special ed?
So this year it was 3.2 million. I believe my last look at the budget, it was about 3.6 million for next year.
I remember, you know, here's a little history, but remember when we didn't have a counselor in the classroom? And, you know, we got a counselor that went between, well, in a building, that went between the buildings. And I don't know how many years ago it was, but, you know, it proved that they needed it, you know? And yet I don't know what they fund, but it's only grown, you know, over the years, and it's paid out of the levies, and so, well, we call them counselors, whatever they're called, you know, this day and age. And the need is still there. I mean, well, I don't know, I thought there were fancier names, but it's just like, the need is there, but when we started with it, they went from building to building, they shared a building.
Yeah.
And we needed more, we saw the need, so, you know, as a board, I'm not just me, but the whole board, you know, we just didn't pull it out of the air. The need was presented and we said yes, and then each time we added, you know, another one.
Yeah, but with our levy failure and the huge cuts that we have to make, we're gonna have to
Yes.
go back to some of that.
Yes, and so it was like, we went from 0 to there, and now we're not gonna go back to 0, but we worked hard all those years to find the funding to support that.
Okay, so now I'm gonna start into breaking down our revenues and expenditures for what's in the budget right now, comparing to current year projections. So these are just the main categories of our revenues. We have our state apportionment, which we talked about. We have our categorical program funding, which is all of our like SPED and LAP and TVIP and HICAP ELL learner programs. And then we have federal and state grants, and we have our EPO levy and levy equalization, and then other miscellaneous revenues. So the next slide just breaks it down. I know that Debbie really likes to see pictures and
Those are
charts.
pretty slide.
I didn't really like the colors, but it breaks down, it just shows where our revenue funding is coming from. So you can see the green, most of it is our state general purpose, our apportionment funding. And then we have our state special purpose, which is those programs that I talked about, our LAP and SPED, state and LAP and TVIP and HICAP. And then we have our federal general purpose, and which is a small amount, and those are like our Medicaid match and Indian Ed programs, the smaller ones. And then we have our special purpose, which are like our title programs, our child nutrition programs, our special ed programs, the federal pieces of those. So and then local taxes is typically more than 6%, but that's what it is for next year. It's typically 10 or more. So that's where we're at. Then this slide is not a pretty picture, but this breaks down the numbers themselves and compares to current year projections to next year's budget in the same categories. I broke out a few more of the operations. So we have our local taxes, LEA. I don't think that's any surprise that that's our biggest revenue reduction of 7.8 million. The difference between current year and budgeted for next year. Our state apportionment dollars are pretty similar. We have the same revenue for state apportionment. So we projected flat enrollment. That's going to provide the same staffing for us. It's gone up a little bit because of some of those increased factors like IPD. And then we have our state categorical programs, the ones I'm talking about, LAP, ELL, TVIP, HICAP, and that includes transitional kindergarten. I didn't mention that one. And that's pretty much the same. Federal programs haven't changed much. Now, the main change there is our ESSER dollars. So we had about 600 and some carryover this year. So the majority of that, we had a little bit of increase in some of them, and then the reduction, we have no carryover in ESSER funds for next year. Transportation operations, I talked about our ridership being down a little bit. So I didn't project quite as much as we received this year, just to be conservative. Food service, same thing. Not sure what's going to happen with our CEP schools as far as our revenue. And then our miscellaneous revenues, like our resale, things we sell. We have some local grants that we get from different organizations, from the Retirees Association and Twin Star and some other local grants. We have some miscellaneous federal funds. Our facility use goes into the miscellaneous revenues, and donations, and then meals. So I didn't project as much as we received this year. We collected a lot of unpaid fines from previous years this last year in our food service. So I projected a little bit less for next year. there any questions about?
Yeah, I got a question. So 7.8 million represents the levy. Is that accurate? The
Levy
funds that we're-
and our local equalization, which we usually get about 2 million a year. We're gonna get 500,000 because we're gonna get our fall payment, so we'll only get 500,000 next year.
So going back a couple months in time, the 15 million has been the number that I'm saying we've got to cut. So can we get into what's the other 7 million, not just the 7.8?
So the levy dollars are based on calendar year. And we do a fiscal year, so it'll be January through December, that's when we would collect our levy dollars. So part of that falls in our fiscal year, so we're gonna get funding up through the end of December. But if you go January, or to the end of December, that's where the full amount would come in that we're gonna lose. And then if we were to pass in February, we wouldn't collect until the following January. So it impacts 2 of our fiscal years as opposed to just calendar year.
Thank you.
Did we ever find out, did we get any help from the timber tax? That. Oh my God. No.
So we received all of our timber excise tax in the spring, and it was about 100,000, a little over 100,000. We won't get any in next year's budget.
You mean just because we didn't
But
pass the
our-
levy,
no,
they're not
so-
gonna give it?
No, so our taxes, like Chris was just talking about, January through December, our property taxes are collected a certain percentage in the spring and a certain percentage in the fall, whereas the
Federal timber tax.
yeah, the excise tax for timber is collected in a spring fully. So we won't have any budgeted for next year. Okay. So now let's break down expenditures, another pretty picture for you. So you can see that salaries and benefits, the red, gray, and green there make up the majority of our expenditures. And then we've got some for supplies, purchase services, and travel, our MSOCs. So that's not really, that doesn't look any different than normal. So I broke down expenditures by object. I don't have a projection by program yet because we haven't finished the year. So the object was the only way I could compare current year projections to next year. Our salaries and benefits and shows the amount we have projected for ending this year and then the amount we have in our budget for next year. And so with all of those together, you can see the total budget reduction from current to next year is about 3.2 million. We know we cut more than that, so I'm gonna go over what our projected cuts are and talk about some of the things that make up that gap. Because costs are going up, negotiations provide increased salaries, so there's a lot of reasons why there is not a reduction of the amount we cut, which is, I'll go over a little bit.
Are you gonna go into the supply increase and capital outlay increase as well?
So the way that I budget for these is I send out the department budgets and they fill out what their needs are for next year. And then I go over each of the budgets with them. So the supplies are, it all depends on, some things are cyclical. So sometimes, like, for example, the transportation department might wait and buy do their tires every other year. So some departments have larger expenses in certain years versus other years. So and we did go through and talk about what they could cut, line item by line item with every department. So the supplies, and that's a budget, doesn't mean that we won't reduce that. Because we will be looking at every purchase that's made. We are not giving credit cards back to buildings so that we can see the expenses before they occur. Otherwise, we see them after the fact and we can't see everything that's being purchased.
So on the travel, when, that's travel like, for you to go to Spokane or something like that, I mean, it's, what's the travel, what does it include? Because we cut back on saying that if there wasn't money, they couldn't travel. I mean,
Right, but there's so much of our travel is paid for out of grants. And so there were reductions made to travel. But we also, we're gonna be looking at every travel request as it comes in. So I'm hoping we won't have the expenditure, much of expenditure, but it wasn't cut very much.
but you won't put that travel in the school board's budget, would you?
I can take it out.
Just wondering where you put it. So travel, it means,
We slashed your budget by about 80%.
Yeah.
So don't worry.
Is that 1.7 million in supply increase is pretty large number, I guess, is nobody else.
the difference, no, I see, but
I mean, our budget's increasing by 1.7 million.
Yeah, and a lot of that is just because of the cost of things. That includes food. There was a significant increase in the cost of food.
so that does include food as supplies? Oh, that's where the,
Yeah, every department's supplies are included in there. I mean, most of that increase is due to, I know the shop does have increased expenses this year because of things they cycle, but a lot of that is just the inflation, inflationary costs.
so the list of supplies are not, to me, it's like, you know, paper and, well, you know, I'm thinking inside of the classroom, but this is including food service and,
Yep, all the departments, all the department supplies, yep.
Now that is also like diesel for the buses. Gasoline
Yep.
for all the vans.
Yep.
Okay.
okay.
Fuel, food, yeah, everything. Mhm.
That's one of the reasons, like Jennifer said, we are making sure that purchases go through
Oh,
the
yeah.
business offices for approval first, so that we can determine whether or not it's necessary. So even though the budget is created, we are still looking to reduce in all of these areas. And so we're gonna be watching spending very, very closely and determining, is it something that's necessary or is it something that's nice to have?
And then they'll just start learning not to ask. Hopefully, we also rerouted the travel requests, so we'll see travel requests before they go to administrators for approval. Because a lot of times there's classes that are offered virtually that are identical to what they're traveling to. So we're looking at all of that. Okay, so the next few slides, I wanted to go over the cost saving estimates that we have to date. And I say estimates because for the staffing, it's a little bit easier, but for a lot of the other cuts, our accounting system doesn't always break things down into the way that we're trying to track the cuts. So we had to make some assumptions and allocate some money to different activities. But central office staffing, we've cut OSL program coordinator, tribal liaison, 3 academic coaches, and community relations position for a total of $677,571. Building administrator positions, $433,000. So we have 3 assistant principals. Classified non-administrative FTE, we have 45.4 total FTE, and then I broke them down here. I'm not going to go through each one. The most significant cuts are operations and paraeducators, but the total is 2.3 million. And I'll send you copies of these slides too, so I'll have them, yeah. Certificated non-admin reductions, 38.4 FTE for a total of 4.2 million. And this is counselors, classroom teachers, CTE teachers, elementary and secondary, a separate specialists, restorative specialist, librarian, and a TOSA. There was one TOSA at the high school. And then other staffing related cuts. These are paras hours reduced to 6 hours. That was a savings of 366,000, and administrative furloughs was approximately 150,000. The next few slides are non-salary related cuts. So that was all of our salary related cuts. And then we have, and we've gone up, Chris has gone over some of these with you before in previous meetings, but we have technology. We are not doing the teacher refresh or student refresh. We'd already purchased the student refresh for next year in the spring because of timing and time in order to get them in time for the new year. But we won't be doing that next year. The teacher refresh had not been done, so we're actually canceling 2 years of refresh this year and next year. And then there's some other replacing ESD services. Dee Dee did a lot of work to get a new application system that was much less expensive than the one that the ESD was wanting us to buy into by raising the cost, like $70,000 or something. And then contracted services. So when I talked about positions, we have positions, but they're contracted positions. So I have them under the MSOC because they come under purchase services. So we have 3 sign language interpreters that we believe will no longer need unless we receive new students that have those needs. School resource officer and social worker. And then we have athletics. Now the athletics, football at the middle school is really hard to gauge. So I just took some of the I figured out what the stipends were and allocated some official costs because they don't separate things out that way by sports. They just kind of share everything and send in one invoice. So it's approximately 20,000. Self-transporting, about 300,000 because I included some transport in that football. So the self-transport is going to save about 300,000. And then other non-salary related cuts. We cut building budgets and allocations by $325,000. Digital curriculum, 100,000, graduation expenses, 15, software renewal, 45, and software elimination, 20. And there's still work being done to see if we can renegotiate some of our software costs. I know Jonathan's been working on that quite a bit. So the total is approximately $2 million in non-salary cuts.
So Jen, on the graduation expenses,
Mhm.
does that mean that's the rental of the Tacoma Dome?
It is the rental of the Tacoma Dome, and it also includes things that that we have been purchasing for our students that typically other districts have their families purchase certain things for the graduation.
Does that include the stipends for the staff?
No, I cut that. So when I did the analysis of what we were spending it on, I took that $5,000 that we pay staff because we were having conversations about not paying staff to attend graduation. But that's a decision that has to be, if we have fundraisers come in, people want to pay to increase the graduation costs, that can happen.
So what does that 15,000 pay for?
It's just cutting the budget from 30,000 to 15,000. If we had a $30,000 budget.
Got it.
And that would also be the difference between Tacoma Dome and St. Martin's.
I guess that was my question.
Yes.
Was that, did the Tacoma Dome cost us 50,000 for graduation? Or did the schools get a break at going to the Tacoma Dome for 25,000?
Yeah, I sent some numbers to you yesterday. Do you remember what they were? I think
That's-
the Tacoma
that's
Dome was
okay.
close to like 17,000
Yeah.
and the
It's 17,000 to go to
Yeah.
the Tacoma Dome.
and St. Martin's was much cheaper. There, St. Martin's, we had to secure our own AV
Right.
contractor and then the facilities, and I think it was around 6,000.
Well, that's what the difference was, is what included in the Tacoma Dome compared to having to pay all the extra fees for St. Martin's, that type of a thing. So you have all those numbers.
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
and it's still much cheaper even after adding the other fees.
But if they wanted to do a fundraiser, and I've been approached by
Yeah.
a few seniors.
So
So I got
the
the
only issue I
information
could see
from-
with that is that we have a signed contract with St. Martin's. And doesn't mean that they wouldn't let us out of it, I don't know. And it might be difficult to get secure a time, but we don't know until we call and ask.
Well, and that's how we were on the list for Tacoma Dome. And it took us a couple of years to get to the Tacoma Dome to have the best time. So it is. It's bad.
So I went over the budget reduction was about 3.3 million. The total cuts to staffing and programs that I just went over is about 10.2 million. So that gap, our costs increase quite a bit between like $5 and $8 million every year. Our expenditures go up from year to year, regardless of whether our levy passes or not. So the gap, some of that gap is so salary increases, like we stated before, we're still negotiating, with two groups. Those are two of the largest groups. We had a 5% increase already negotiated for our OPs. And then we have, step increases, so staff that moved up on steps. We have special ed increased costs for class coverage, class overage and coverage. Knowing that we are reducing staff, we will likely have larger class sizes, so we'll be paying likely more overage. And then continued rising costs for, we've already talked about utilities, food, fuel, insurance, et cetera. Any questions?
So we cut 10.2 million, but that's only reducing our expenses by 3.3, so there's a $7 million increase in costs.
So, so this is just showing our ending fund balance. Last week when we had the meeting on adopting the resolution, it was approximately 1.2, but after finalizing the budget and going through a lot of reconciliations, it's 1.3312. So that's just breaking it down. It was about 100,000 more than we talked about last week. Okay, so fund balance monitoring. So we have to have plans in place to start replenishing our depleted fund balance. Going into binding conditions, we'll be working with OSPI, and they will be supporting us in that. We'll be meeting with them quarterly and submitting monthly reports, but we'll be going over more of that next week with them on what those conditions will look like. We'll be closely monitoring our own revenues and expenditures. We do that anyway to avoid potential recovery of funds or certain programs that we have, and if we don't meet minimum spends, then the state takes the money back because they funded us for it throughout the year. And so, and then we try to maximize our K-3 class size reduction compliance. We didn't quite meet that this year, so we need to continue watching that. And so continue analyzing all expenditures and staffing to identify additional potential reductions. And these are just conversations we're having all the time. These are things that we're working on, we're already working on, and we just need to continue. So as we get further to the year, then we're gonna have to talk about where we're at, what the deficit is still, and what additional cuts we need to talk about for next spring for finalizing contracts for 25-26. Since we know this is a 2-year problem with our levy funding not coming in. Okay, the next slide, so see handout. So I gave you the handout. I think you've kind of already glanced at it. I have some general assumptions. It's hard enough to do a 1-year budget, let alone a 4-year forecast. So most districts use this approach where they just basically pretend nothing's gonna change. So we pretend that there aren't gonna be any legislative changes that help us, no new revenue streams. We just have small increases in expenditures and revenues. But the difference for us is that we have our failure. So you'll see in the 26-27 forecast, I've made assumptions that we're gonna pass our levy in February. And so that's what the 4-year forecast is showing. But as you can see, we're talking about the 1.3 million deficit for our budget this year that we just talked about. And with not receiving our levy funds, if things stay the way they are and we don't cut it, if we don't make any additional cuts, we would have that deficit would go up to 7.6 million next year. And then when our levy comes in, again, if there are no changes, we will slowly start rebounding. And that's assuming no enrollment growth too. And that's probably not likely. We will likely have enrollment growth over the next few years.
That was a question with all the misinformation out there, and they're saying that the kids aren't coming to Yelp. We won't know those numbers until the doors, until they're coming.
Right, so
We
yeah.
haven't seen any of the,
Well, this week, we started collecting registrations from all the buildings,
Yeah.
and then we're gonna meet tomorrow. Chris and Dee Dee and I go over those numbers.
right,
And Debbie's been getting a lot of calls from the families that we told to wait until August for transfers, because they're still wanting to come in. And so we'll be looking at those tomorrow. We just received them for a couple days. I kind of glanced at them and some numbers look a little off, but for the most part, the projections are pretty close. We don't have a huge increase in.
But it's an unknown.
Right,
Even
kids are
if-
still registering too,
Right.
so we don't know.
We don't.
Right.
My challenge, if I take you back to spring, we denied a lot of transfers. Specifically because we knew we were gonna be cutting staff.
Right.
We had to cut staff because of loss of levy funds and having to reduce expenditures. Well, there is kind of that sweet spot of taking some students, but you do have to hire staff. So it's a very interesting process that we have to look at very carefully. And so we already have each building giving us their numbers a couple times a week so that we can monitor them closely. And then there are some places where we can add students to fill classes, but it doesn't always work to our advantage just to take them all because they bring funding with them, because it also would require us to hire staffing.
So you're talking just about in district, you're not talking about out of district.
I'm talking both. Well, out of district for the
Yeah.
transfers in for additional revenue. We do have some in district that are transferring from one school to the next, and
But
we try when we can to accommodate those.
Like you say,
But
the
we've
monies
denied.
don't follow someone coming from North Thurston into this district and it costs us.
No, the money from the state does follow the student. What doesn't follow the student
Is the
is local
taxes.
levy. Local levy dollars do not follow the student, but state dollars do follow the student wherever they attend, because we get paid based on our enrollment.
But it's always been an unknown as far as till the doors open in our first count. You know, we always take it conservative.
Well, you have to with enrollment. You've got to be a little bit conservative because you don't want to over project and then be under. But I will say, even in light of the challenges we've had, people still want to come here.
I guess I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around something, so. We have a $7 million essentially increase in expenditures for the next year, that's the 10.2 minus 3.3. Cut 10.2, we're showing 3.3 still, as the only thing that we're actually reducing, but then. Your total expenditures between 25 and 26, 26, 27, 27, 28, it's only showing 1.5 to 2 million add each year. Why is this year a $7 million add and all of a sudden it's 2?
And the same with the revenue, I'm just using a percentage, just small percentages, because we don't know what's gonna happen, like I said, with the legislature, we don't know if inflation's gonna get a lot better. There's so many unknowns, I just used a increase across the board, the same amount for revenues and expenditures.
Cause I mean, wouldn't a $7 million, are we saying that other districts around the area are gonna see a similar increase this next year? Wouldn't that put a lot of them in a similar situation, even if they did pass their levies, having a $7 million increase in expenditures?
We have that every year almost. But our budget 4 years ago was like 67,000, 5 years ago.
And we are seeing that actually. I just met with Thurston County Soups yesterday. Olympia is cutting, has been cutting. You've read about that in the paper. Tumwater is cutting. North Thurston is cutting, or has cut. The smaller districts, they've already made some small adjustments, but within our county, the bigger districts are all cutting even with levy dollars.
And when I budget, I'm being conservative, so I always hope that these numbers get better and that our expenses are less than we're projecting, but we have to be careful to not be conservative.
does that answer your?
I think last year, the fund balance projection came out about $600,000 or $700,000 better than we projected.
I'm thinking though, but because of the increase in costs, we're gonna have to cut more
Or less.
than what everybody thinks we have to cut. Because of the increased prices of materials we have to purchase.
Absolutely. yeah, that will certainly influence the cutting, and that's why, on the cutting side of things, we're, trying not to underestimate what we're gonna have to cut. We'll know more after, the legislative session, but we're gonna be cutting and reducing all year long, and then in the spring, when we can, potentially address some of the deficit through attrition, through retirements and resignations, we'll have to. We'll have to, reduce staffing again. Hopefully not a reduction in force, but hopefully, we can accomplish that through attrition, but then go back to our initial conversation around staffing and covering, safety, making sure that we have at the high school, for example, enough courses for students to meet their graduation requirements. But we will have to thin down even more, next year. However, by then, we're gonna know the outcome of the levy. And so we'll know how far out, we're gonna have to cut based on revenue that will be coming in potentially the following January.
Well, I know when we do vouchers and payroll, you know, and we take turns. And we've done it over the years. And I know that when I'm paying attention, I'm absolutely shocked in the last couple of years when our power bill and our gas and all those big things have just, and food, have just, you know, gone out of
Yeah.
craziness.
And Casey, I had the same concerns you did when I was looking at those numbers when the budget was first completed. And so I did a 10-year analysis of our increases in expenditures. I took out all the ESSER funds because that kind of throws things off. And it was about a 5.2 million increase, but if I went from just like 2018, when we had our huge salary increases to current, it was higher than that.
It was 5.2 per year.
Yeah, a 10-year average. And there was some low years, but since McCleary, since 17, 18, our costs have gone up more significantly than before that.
So then that's saying that on this sheet, the total expenditures after this first year should start increasing more rapidly than this is showing, because this is showing 1.5 to 2 million increase per year.
Yeah, so this is a 4-year forecast. The only point of doing this is it's required by the state, but it's a forecast that's almost impossible. So I could go in and do an average of all of our different line items and how they've increased over the last several years. You know, I could do that. I just don't know what the purpose would be.
I mean, because looking at this, it's gonna take us
It's a useless exercise.
12 or 14 years to get out of the hole that we're digging into, which I don't fully understand either.
If we don't make cuts, so this is assuming, these numbers are assuming, we know we're gonna make more cuts. This is assuming we don't make any more cuts.
But this is based on the cuts we've already made to date.
Right, but that's only half of what we need to do.
Yeah, it's assuming no more.
It's assuming no more cuts are made, when we know we have to make cuts.
So if we don't make any more cuts, this is what it's gonna look like over the next.
Well,
Yeah.
if we, there's a
Right.
lot of assumptions. You know,
Right,
If we don't
if
get any new
everything
revenue,
stayed
if we
the
don't-
same,
I mean, hopefully the
Yeah.
legislature will fix some things and we'll start
Right.
getting some more revenue and that will help offset some of our expenditure increases.
cause it's really bleak.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is.
and when half of the districts are binding conditions, maybe they'll start listening.
Yeah,
Well, this assumes levy passage the next time too.
yeah.
If you,
It does.
for some reason that.
26, 27.
Yeah.
Well, I've shared this with you before, but 3 of the statewide initiatives from superintendent groups and other education groups across the state with the legislature is MSOCs. That we're asking them to fund those at the actual cost. Special education, still, even though they did make a little adjustment this past year, that's helpful. I think it was 1% more that we didn't have to take out of our general fund. And then the other is transportation. Well, 2 of those would help us significantly if they increased what they're paying for special ed. Remember Jennifer said over 3 million we had to supplement.
Yeah.
And then MSOCs, everybody across the state would benefit from that. We're talking helping cover healthcare, the supplies costs, which right now, they are not keeping up with the huge increases in healthcare costs to districts every year, they're still funding us the same as they've been.
Yeah.
So if we make progress on those three, two of them will help us significantly. Because then what that does is that just frees up general fund dollars for us.
And the ESD has done some good analysis on showing the history of some of that too, and how underfunded we are for MSOC increases compared to what inflation has been. It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
So the last slide really is just to go over things we already know. So we won't be able to submit a balanced budget. We talked about that last week. We had the resolution submitted. Final budget is showing 1.3 versus the 1.2 we talked about last week. And then we're gonna be working with OSPI next week on our what those binding conditions might look like. And they know that we were working hard to make significant cuts. And so there are some districts that they work with that they can very clearly tell they're not doing anything to try to write.
So what we did before we did the binding, they recognize that,
Yes.
right? It's
Oh,
not-
yes,
Yeah,
yes.
they know that
They
we,
understand completely
Okay.
where we're at.
because they're not including us in other districts that didn't do that at the get-go. Okay. Anybody got any more questions?
And if you think of questions later, please get those to Chris or Debbie, and I will try to pull more data. I want to make sure that you feel comfortable about what the budget looks before adoption next week. And like I said, if you're not, we need to have another session and go over some other areas.
This has to be in,
What's
when
that?
does it have to be in budget?
It'll be,
to the-
well, we set adoption for next Thursday, the 22nd.
But isn't there a cutoff date that?
Oh, the 31st, it has to be certified by the 31st.
Okay,
So,
before we go to jail?
so the very last we could do it is at our board meeting on the 29th, because then the next day is when you have to certify, and then it's the weekend, it's too late. And we did advertise, this week and next, so we have to advertise for 2 weeks, when we're gonna have our budget adoption, so we've met that requirement.
I have to say thank you to your team and yourself for
Thank you.
all of the extra. We really appreciate it. And when you hear stories of other districts and the things that are going on, we are pretty darn lucky to have you guys. And we really do appreciate it. And I'm not a numbers person, but I understand what, I'm trying to understand the work that you do. And it just,
You asked the right questions, so
You know.
you're understanding.
yeah. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and a big thank you to Jennifer. She's spent a lot of time. She had to have her daughters come tonight to see them.
They might want to get home late every night, so they're saying, we're gonna come and see why you're so late coming home.
But I really appreciate Jennifer a lot for what she does and the time that she is spending working with the ESD. And we will be with OSPI and reaching out to a number of people to just say, hey, double check this, tell me if we're missing something here. And I appreciate her willingness to do that. But also just the amount of time that she's been spending on, oh, by the way, there's her regular job too.
Yeah, that's what I.
Of the normal day-to-day operations, and her team has been awesome. And same with Dee Dee and her team
Yes.
that's sitting right here in the front row with Shelley, Tammy, and Carrie. They are a pretty amazing team, and these two teams worked very closely together. Even though they speak a different language in HR and payroll, they have to.
They're like, what did you just say?
They speak very different languages, but they work so well together, and I really appreciate them very much. They put in way more time than they are compensated for, because they care about the people in our district. It's pretty cool.
But I know you've all fielded more questions than normal, and it hasn't been a normal year. But you just have to know that we know you're in the back giving us the numbers and you're being honest and upfront and transparent.
And I'm not perfect. If somebody wants to point out that.
You like the word
I just
transparent?
like how you were looking at me with side eye.
You caught that, did you?
And the truth is, most days I go down to that end of the building just to make sure that they're here.
Yeah.
To see that they came back.
You don't,
I also just say hi, but
you don't speak their language, I know what they're talking about.
I've learned to speak both a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm just not fluent in both.
He's our mediator. He goes back and forth between us, and this is what she meant to say, or this is what she's trying to tell you.
I'm the peacekeeper.
Oh,
Well,
okay,
they're
good,
great,
good,
they're
yeah.
great.
It makes a
They
big
are
difference.
great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for your support too. It's been tough times.
We're gonna move on to something a little more fun, I think, that has been a ton of work.
Donuts?
Close to donuts, but different. Our new website, which will be launching tomorrow. And you guys are gonna get a preview. Before we jump into this, I need to thank Debbie and Terry. They put in,
Oh, the district.
I don't even know how many hours you two have put in on
We're
this,
not gonna count them right now.
along with, we don't have.
They're not gonna get paid because there's no overtime.
Along with, yeah, we don't have that overtime, but, along with our interns have done a tremendous amount of work as well, which they've been awesome. But we're really excited about this. And so Terry's gonna share, a little bit about, what you're gonna see when this launches tomorrow.
So this is the new website. I just read
This is
it.
it.
Now, this is it.
Okay.
This is a preview version, so there's a couple of things that I can't show you because it's not live. And a lot of that has to do with accessibility and some personalization. And so with this new website, and I'm gonna kind of start with the story of, we did not choose to do this. What happened was a year and a half ago, Blackboard, who was our contracted service and hosted our website, was bought out by Final Site, which is another national company that manages I'm gonna say they focus on K-12 education, communication services and websites. And so we were basically given the opportunity to transition, or we had to find a new vendor. And so we negotiated with them. Basically, our first 2 years was less than what we were paying with Blackboard, and they were helping with some of the transition. And we had the opportunity to pick our dates of transition, and we assumed that working on it this spring and moving forward would have been easier than trying to do it during the levy. And so we had kind of put it off to later in the year, and the end of August was when we had to transition by. So we are down to the wire, but we are ready. So and there's always going to be some things that we're going to change and upgrade and do as we go along. But this again was not something that we chose to do. We did it based on our vendor requirement and providing a service that we have to provide. Just which vendor we use is up to us. So there was no additional cost to this. And we did actually get a lot of new services and an opportunity for us to really go through our materials and present our information in a much more concise, clear way and across the district. So even our staff have a less work that they have to maintain, because the philosophy of this website is called COPE, and is create once and publish everywhere. So therefore, we're not making 10 changes, we're making one change and it's showing up in 10 locations. And so that really does create the efficiencies and reduce the work of many of the staff who manage the sites at the building level also. So I'm going to kind of share a little bit of the layout and design just so you can kind of see it. And we've kind of said it will come out in our last newsletter. It'll launch tomorrow morning. There will be some downtime. We assume there's always a little, time for it to populate. So hopefully it won't be an inconvenience to too many people. But we hope that it'll be live and running by noon tomorrow or before, but that's our goal. And then from here on out, we'll be managing it off of the site. What doesn't change is our URL. So whatever we go into, ycs.waynet.edu, it's the same thing. So they'll be redirected to this without us losing our families or our customers. And so we'll go from there. But like I said, this, yeah.
Hurry up.
Hurry up, this is a cool thing. What we really, when Debbie and I really looked at the designs, we tried to make sure that it felt somewhat similar to our current site when families went to navigate, because they're very used to something. It's really a muscle memory type of thing. So our headers and stuff up here, again, are very similar. They're the same topics the families are looking for. They're gonna go to that same place. We have our categories here. And so again, very similar, but we did try to make things a little bit more apparent. Our last website had just this big laundry list, A to Z, like with 40 or 50 different topics. We've tried to categorize them a little bit. And they're the same at all the schools. So if you're at the school, at one school to the next school, you're gonna find the resources in the same sections. So those are important. And then the underside to this is that it is ADA compliant, and everything that it really sets up will support all users. And then when it does go live, you'll see in this lower left-hand corner, there will be almost like a little icon of a person. And when they click on it, people can personalize, like, do you want larger font? Or do you want a color contrast? Or do you want, so there's a lot of things that anyone can personalize the layout of the look. So which is really nice for, and again, not only just for anyone who has disabilities, but anyone who has just wants to have a different look or layout. So you see, again, these categories, our district or our schools, and we'll pop into one of those, really gives, you know, what are the things about our district that are really important and very specific. Anything related to academics. So as you heard earlier today, a lot of our programs and our academic program information, the parents, front forwarding the parents is here. Department and services, again, this is many of the reports that you heard, but also how do families and community connect with all of us and the different services that we provide. Engagement is focused on those things that are either we're partnering with or ways that our community and families can engage with us. And so that's all listed here. And then we did maintain our family resources section. Some of these items are the resources that we're able to provide as a district. Others are references and resources that our community has. So childcare is always a big question. What schools, where do childcare in our area? So we try the best we can, and we continue to learn and stay connected as to which childcare programs are available in our area. So it's not that we're endorsing one or the other, but sometimes they want to know if there's transportation from our schools. And so we maintain this and keep this information current.
Was that there before, Terry?
Yeah.
Like that?
Yeah, but it was really
You
hard
just
to
couldn't
find.
Oh,
Yeah, very
I
difficult.
never-
Same with our community resources.
Yeah.
We've called around, we keep this list as current as possible. Shannon's department provides more information. Whenever we learn of resources, we put them in there and it looks very similar. When we look at our departments and resources, we're gonna continue to work on data and updating information. So when you look at the business services program or department, the layout is very similar. We all will work to have an opening statement about the services, what the department's about. When you need support, here's who you contact. And then again, frequently asked questions or hot topics or information. And so a lot of this budget information will start going into this section here. So people will be able to go directly to those sections. Another area that you can take a look at is in HR. Again, this is where people who are coming to our website to look for employment opportunities, who do they contact? Our staff come here to check out the handbook and resources that are available to them. And then we also have information about our labor groups. And so when we look at, since we've been talking about teachers, you can go through and look at, detailed information about salary range, wage increases over time. Again, as you had mentioned earlier, Debbie, that transparency of what is available and what are each of our bargaining units providing. And then before, we always had these two where they had collective bargaining agreement, the calendar and the salary schedule. Those have always been on our website, but they're again broken down by each of our category groups, and then a summary of that information. So we're trying to, again, provide more content information on the website, and thank you to the HR department for getting all that information. So we're ready to go live tomorrow.
I'll just add to that, we kind of copied Tacoma School District template for that section. we hear a lot about transparency.
Oh,
And people throw that word around pretty quickly, and so for us, that means making available the information that we already have in our district, it's already available. But how can we make that more accessible to anybody that wants to see it? And so we learned a lot about that during the levy, during bargaining, during all kinds of things. And so we're just taking the approach of, you know what, if it's public documents, we're gonna put it out there for everybody to see so that there are no questions and that they understand there's no secrets here. And so I appreciate our team. When they saw this model, Terry was like, yep, we can do that. And then working with our departments to gather the data, and then we just keep it updated. So it's pretty cool.
Well,
So,
Terry sort of taught us to be, myself and Denise, snobs when it comes to looking at, maybe that's not the right term, but when you look at a website and we'll be at a conference and we'll look and we'll go, oh, this is horrible,
That's not
or
very good.
how do we find this? Or when you're looking for the transparency. And it makes a big difference in finding it because it's there. I don't know how to navigate or find it. So.
and I think that's part of it is how easy is it for somebody to find what they're looking for?
Yeah.
And so we know that if it takes more than 2 clicks to find it, they're gonna stop looking and believe it's not there. And so we really want to be able to help people find that context and look for it. Our previous website had a shortcuts list. This is now in an icon format. So each of our schools at grade level, elementary, secondary, have different icons based on what's important to them. For the district, we have board documents. That's one request that the community had, is how quickly can we get to that information? So we made that very accessible. You can dig in and find it under the board section under our district, but it's also very, very quickly to access. Calendar information, all those key things that people are looking for on a regular basis. News and announcements is a little bit different, and so this is our featured item right now. We have different featured articles that are important that will rotate through here, but we also have our latest news and our upcoming events. What's really kind of neat about this is when you click on it, it pops open. And so you don't go to a whole new page, it's right there. And so same with the board reports. You can click right into it. If there were links or if you needed to click on the location, it would directly go to a Google map. And so if there's more content, we can actually add in descriptions and pictures even into the calendar. And those are directly synced from the calendars in the schools. So it's really nice. You can load more or you can go to all. So you can view all your events. Again, this is in each of the schools. And so here you can go back and look at the history. So picture day from the high school is here. There's lots of things that are populating so they can see articles from across the district. And then the calendar events, this is a new feature. When you go to the full calendar, right now you just see the district event on the front. But here on our all events calendar from the district, you can filter because all schools are listed, all calendars are listed. So if you have a student who's at McKenna and at YMS, you can just choose those two calendars and see what's going on at those schools and say, oh, I have a conflicting event for my child, right? Or what's coming up this week. I can take a look at the schools or what's going across the district. So for the board, you can see all the events at all the schools in one location. And that's one thing you've been looking for is how do we see what's going on in all the schools?
Well, without making it so difficult to
Right.
send it to Debbie, Debbie's gotta, put it on
Duplicating
the
work.
calendar and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. It's just,
So this is a nice way to, you can deselect all.
well, how do I find, so say I wanna look at the whole calendar.
So you're on the main page.
Yeah.
You come down here and you go view full calendar.
Yeah.
And when you do that, it'll take you here and then you can filter by whichever. I'm gonna
I need a
deselect
fall.
and I'm just gonna pick the district's calendar, which is Weiss, where is the district calendar? Right there, district calendar, and I wanna see Prairie and I wanna see YHS.
Okay.
And then when I say update calendar, it will only list those things that are happening at those schools.
Oh.
And then you
Got
can
it.
just refresh that, update the calendar.
And then it tells you in the words on the side, oh, cool.
And again, all these are nice pop-ups, you don't leave that,
Can you print that, Terry?
I don't know. Yeah, right there. Good question. Print. So it prints this element.
Where'd you see the print?
Right here. It's the first
Oh, I
little,
see.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
first little square. So, nice little feature. Again, you can get to our schools right here. So all of our different schools. And I'll go to one of those. But before I do, I want to point out that there's also the translation. So Google is slightly criticized when they have all the languages. And so this website, the final site, they give you the 5 top, and this software is much more accurate. So they believe the translation, and we've given them the top 5 languages in our district based on student enrollment. And so we only have 5 translated here. So, but anybody can click on Spanish.
That's 80, I mean, that's
Yep,
all good.
yep.
So can the different buildings use this?
So alls we can use it for is translation of the website.
Oh,
But what we are
I
working
see.
really hard to do is everything that we communicate to families goes on the website in content, not as a document, so that it can be translated for families. And it immediately just translates right on the website for all of our families. And then if you want to take it back, it goes to, so it's just a click of a button and it's automatically translated. And then, like I said, schools, we can just jump, I'll go to YMS. Them for a while. And again, we've got, the color scheme for each school, same layout, same design. Click on, orientation, they get a nice big detail of what's going on for our middle school orientations, same thing. But when you get down to the bottom, they get to put out some highlights. And so that was on the district site too. I just didn't scroll all the way down. But each school gets to put on pictures and highlights and celebrate the things that are going on in their schools. And we're getting better at learning how photos embed and load, but that one's a little cut off right there. But we're working on learning on how this particular feature works. But again, what's really nice is that when they go to our school, they get to see the things that are related to their school. When they go to bell schedules, again, this is something that's always a challenging. Parents want to know, what the periods are, what happens when there's an assembly, what happens when there's a late start, and each school has their information embedded right there. So,
Notice Skyward is up there, even though we don't have Skyward anymore.
so that's a really very observant, Bill. So I asked a number of students and a few families that I said, so where do you go to look for your login to Q or cumulative? And they're like, what's that? What's that? And I said, where you log in to check your grades or anything like that? Oh, you mean Skyward? And so I kind of looked around some of the other school districts that have moved to the Q version of Skyward, and they all still say Skyward. And when you go actually to Skyward, it still says Skyward. It doesn't say Q.
Yeah.
So we felt that it was easier on the families and the students to leave it at the word that they knew what it was. We know that we moved to cumulative because it's the new software version and it's what we're working with for us, but they don't see any difference in terms of how they access it. So we are leaving it as Skyward because that's what our audience understands.
And last week I was on the high school website trying to get the sports schedule, and it still said there that we were 3A. So is that gonna be updated
So
tomorrow?
as soon as, yes, those are things that we're going through every page to update information on. And so now that you pointed to that, I'll go take a look. But again, I get the information from the buildings as quickly as I can to update. And
You were on the old stuff.
Yeah.
This is
The old
check.
website.
yeah, so most of that scraped over is what they call it, and we redesigned the website with content, and some of that was brought over before, we made some decisions in the district. So thanks for bringing that up. We'll go take a look on the new website to see that it says we're 4A. And again, what will happen tomorrow is there will be a pop-up for anytime anybody visits the website for the next couple of weeks that says, hey, we've got a new website, take a look at our new features. And if you see anything that may be inaccurate or that's not working, you can report those. Because some people are gonna be looking at pages that, really need to be scrutinized and it's important to them. And they'll be able to report it to us and we'll be able to change that immediately. So that's just one other way that we're doing it. The one last thing I was gonna say is that this site is way more mobile friendly for all kinds of devices. So we're able to take a look at this particular page and see what it looks like before we publish it. That looks like on a tablet, on a cell phone, or on a desktop computer. And it does transition very well versus our old website that was not very mobile friendly. And very difficult to.
Cuss it every time
Yeah. I mean, it is, most of them are still challenging, but this one is a lot better. And it's scroll oriented. That's just what happens with websites. So, but we're really pleased with it. I think that people will get used to it very quickly. And again, you see the similarity to whenever you see anything, engagement, family resources, it looks exactly the same as the district. And when they go to the childcare, they don't get sent away to another website. They stay on the whatever school site they're on, and the information populates. So we won't be sending them and popping up windows and going all over the place. They're really gonna be self-contained within the school that they're looking at.
So we got the new guys on our part of the website, or do we, are they blank?
So again, you can just click back to the district.
Well, I'm just teasing you because
No,
before
absolutely, sure.
they were changing it and,
Yeah.
you know,
And so we got the new board photo,
oh, look at it.
but we will be taking a new one at the next meeting. Is that what
Yeah.
we're asking for?
Yeah.
So we've got that, and then you can, we've got
Does it
just,
say Casey Shaw, the new guy?
She goes to.
She's not the new guy anymore.
The new guy and the newest guy.
New guy.
that's on.
It's on the side too.
No, I told Russ it was the new guy and the newest guy.
Oh, and so here, these are some of those areas of focus. So when you wanna meet the board or get the agendas or find out when the meetings are. So here's meet the board, and then it breaks down by each of the directors. So we click in here
With a map.
with a map of your boundaries.
You did get that in there, Deb. Was talking.
So
Yeah. Where
There you
your map
go.
is. Good.
The old one didn't have our email address on it, did it?
Yeah.
Yes, it was just a link to your name. Your name links to your email, to the email address, and the ADA compliance requires us to spell it out. So that's why it's more apparent this time.
Yeah, you just look at it.
And again, we tried to be very consistent across the district and create some things that felt like they were actions. Oh, I'm gonna download something here. Or it's a link and they know that it's gonna link them to something else. So we really tried to make it a little bit more interactive, or at least communicate that there's an activity versus just something that's underlined and said, oh, maybe that's a link. So again, just trying to use the features that this website offers. And we hope that everybody finds it as friendly and user-friendly as we do.
It's not a cuss-free guarantee for you, Bill, but pretty close. So
I do a lot of.
please keep us informed.
When he's at home, we gotta, nobody's there to help us.
I find it relieves tension.
You only have yourself to blame. Wow, pretty cool. Thank you. Lot of work. Debbie, are you satisfied with it?
There's a few things.
We're continuing to learn about the features it offers, and so there are things that we will change moving forward, but we had to get the majority of it done, and we're tweaking it as we go.
We have board comments. We're almost done. Not sure where we're at. Casey, do you have any board comments or?
Not a lot, I just appreciate all the work went into the budget, thanks for this, I'll tear it.
These are pages, I expect feedback.
If nothing else, you'll be able to keep the house warm by
Yeah.
running it through a while.
Still have fire starters.
I can't believe you gave him one and not me. Jeez.
I'm sorry, just because he's the new guy, that's why that's why. No other reason.
Good one.
I'll just get it on my laptop.
Okay, Bill, anything?
Thank you for all the work on the budget, and thanks to all the different schools and the departments for the information we got today. I will be on vacation next week, so I won't be at the next meeting, but probably be in the middle of Yellowstone.
Tell us why you're on vacation.
Our 50th wedding anniversary
Hey.
Saturday. Yeah.
And she put up with you for 50
Yep.
years.
I don't know if we'll be able to spend a whole week together.
Yeah, you did, because I just spent 2 with Gary. It can be done. Take a lot. Denise.
Well, I'd say, ditto to these guys and, thanks for hanging in with us because it's been a difficult process here. But, I appreciate everyone hanging in there with us. We're gonna get through this together. Together, we're stronger.
Well, and we all are saying the same thing, but I came this morning thinking that this was gonna be a Debbie Downer, or, was gonna be whining and that. And I think all the presentations of everybody, we have this, I do, this energized that we do have a lot of good principals, staff, teachers, you guys, and I mean, I'm not gonna dance on the table, but I feel pretty darn good sitting this whole day with just the uplifting, just the, I don't know if you want to say we're regenerated or shocked, whatever. I was really surprised. I mean, it was really good, and even the format and the things that, the team did for putting it out there, it didn't get boring, and those building principals and everybody here, I mean, I think we can do it.
This community is.
I mean, I don't think they meant to jazz us up or revitalize us, but that's what they did. And so would you pass that on to the ones that we didn't? Because, that's what we got from the beginning and right down to the, end. The bad news. Yeah.
I know.
Well, I think
But it
this
was.
community is lucky. We have a great school district. I mean, so we got dealt a little bit of difficulty here, a lot of difficulty, but we have people that in this district that are saying, okay, we're gonna step up and we're gonna educate these kids the best way we can.
And there wasn't any
Whatever it
whining,
takes, we're gonna do it together. And so here we are.
but just pass that on, Chris, because they're not
Yeah,
as far as.
so we're gonna stand together and we're gonna do it.
And if you see the, get to look over it with all your stacks of paper, with the buildings, it really was.
It was very good.
Yeah.
We've got outstanding leaders in this community.
Do you have any, moving right along?
Just brief, I'll just add to that. First of all, thanks for being here since 8 AM. Listening to all the departments, all the building reports. I agree, I think they did a fantastic job. There's a lot to be hopeful about, even in spite of our challenges. I enjoy coming to work every day, regardless of what is said about me on social media and other places. Because I think that the people that know me, and the ones who don't, I invite them to come in and meet with them. And so I just really appreciate the people that I get to work with every day. We've got people that care so much about our staff, our students. It's amazing. Every single day I see it. And we'll get through these challenges, and it's gonna be challenging, but I have no doubt we'll get through it. And last thing is, I took some time off on Friday and a little bit on Monday. My son, as I shared, I think, pictures with a couple of you, got married on Saturday, and he's currently in Hawaii with his wife and having a great time, but it was a lot of fun. Really a highlight, so thanks for letting me be gone for a little bit.
We didn't want to bug you. We called Debbie. We didn't bug you,
Only
Debbie
one
wouldn't
person
let us
bugged
get
me.
to you, you know.
Only one person bugged me, and that was Jennifer. And, but I didn't mind.
Important.
It was
It was
important.
important, yeah.
Yeah, I had to tell them to pause the wedding, but.
It was Friday.
Yeah, I know. But, thank you for your commitment. Appreciate each of you and the time you spend, supporting our district. And, the time you spend, responding to questions, concerns, emails, phone calls. People don't get to see that. And so, thank you for that.
Just saying. And look at the Nisqually Valley News, our friend is here to report our big, website, it's all of this information, so. Nope, it was a good day. It was a good day. It was a long day, but it was a good day and the meeting is adjourned. Oh, do I have to say when the next board meeting? Oh, it's next Thursday, figured out.
They can look it up.
Yeah, yeah.